Hey, welcome everybody to Athearn Extra. We're at the new Athearn Extra, and I've got next to me I got George and Bogota from SoundTraxx. And what are we going to do today, George?
Well, first off, we're going to plug where we're at.
We should.
We are here at the Rocky Mountain Train Supply.
Yes.
Right here in Denver, Colorado, Arvada, one of the suburbs.
Right.
And we're here. They've given us this beautiful little backdrop here. We almost feel like stars. It's kind of funny.
We do. Or, we could be like news people, too.
Yeah, there you go.
It is. What's the weather out there like today?
Why don't you grab your mic and put it on?
I probably should do that, shouldn't I?
Nobody's heard a word you said.
No. All the good humor's gone.
Yeah, well, that was wasted.
And it's on the floor now.
There you go. You ever done this before?
No, never done this. I just showed up today and they put a microphone on.
There you go. So, yeah, we're here at Rocky Mountain Train Supply in Arvada, Denver, Colorado. And they're also formerly known, here you can move a little bit, as N-Scale Supply.
N-Scale Supply, yep.
So if you guys are familiar with that name, either way, this is where we're at. And they've given us this beautiful little table to work on.
Yep.
Nice backdrop behind us. It was pretty impressive.
It is pretty impressive. And we've got some stuff here. I'm gonna put our other camera on here so you can see what we're working on.
Yeah, so we got some cool stuff to show off.
Yeah.
We got some Athearn Dash 9s. We've got some Blue Nami. We can answer your SoundTraxx questions with Athearn products.
Absolutely.
We can answer your Athearn questions and your SoundTraxx questions. So
exactly. Let's get started.
We're trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I know, right? So here's what I told everybody. I said, a lot of our guys they go out and they get a nice Genesis locomotive like this Norfolk Southern right here. This is Dash 9. We've had this a couple of runs now, and what's really cool about this one is equipped with the Tsunami 2 decoder. And one of the things that you and I were talking about this over dinner one night is like guys don't know that you can fine tune stuff on these.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of features and settings. You're getting a full Tsunami 2 in the decoder, and so you're not having to worry about a lot of limited features or anything like that. Anything a Tsunami 2 can do, the Athearn Tsunami 2 can do as well. So you can go in, and we talk about one of our big features that we have with our decoders is called Dynamic Digital Exhaust, or DDE. And what this does is this will allow the diesel engine, the sounds to react based on the load on the motor. So when your locomotive is working harder up a grade, or if you have a heavier train, what's the engineer got to do? Well, he's got to throttle up to get more power. And so our dynamic digital exhaust will actually read the load on that motor and will increase the diesel engine automatically, automatically without you having to fiddle around with this. All you have to do is worry about the speed, and the dynamic exhaust processor will then work on taking care of that sound for you. So you get that interactive live sound. So you can spend more time rail fanning your run rather than playing your buttons on here like a musical instrument. And so the cool thing is it's fairly easy to set up. And so the way it works is we have a calibration process because every motor is just a little bit different, and you want to optimize the DDE processor for that motor. And like a motor in here is going to be different than, say, the RTR line, right, or a motor from here may be different than other brands of models out there. And so the idea of the calibration allows that to be more fine-tuned. And so if you go to our YouTube channel, videos on it, we walk you through the step-by-step and program the CVs. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to calibrate the dynamic exhaust processor at speed step 1. And what that's going to do, we're going to go ahead and do that here in just a moment so you can actually see and hear the difference. But you're going to do this at speed step 1. And what it does is it will actually start a minimum power consumption. It plots a point on a graph, power consumption versus speed step. And it says, okay, at speed step 1, the minimum amount of power to turn that motor is here. And then you go in and you start running your locomotive at, say, speed step 20 or speed step 30, somewhere that you normally run your locomotive. And then you calibrate again at that speed. And the decoder says, okay, let's say we're at speed step 30. And you do your calibration CV again, and then it plots a second point. And I'm trying to do this from your perspective here. So it plots a second point on this graph so that we have our voltage or power to the motor, and then we have our speed step. And what it does is it creates a line. And it says, this is my expected power consumption for the motor. Now, if you're running your locomotive, and let's say you encounter a grade, Well, now your locomotive is working harder.
Sure.
Now, through the back EMF, back electromotive force, this is something that you hear about decoders a lot, and we can answer questions about that if you have it. But what it does is it'll determine how much power that motor's using, so that if the motor needs more power, let's say this is where you're at, but this is your baseline graph, well, then the DDE processor sees that and says, oh, that locomotive needs more power. So the diesel engine will notch up. Or in the case of a steam locomotive, you'll hear that chuff intensify because, of course, it doesn't get faster. And then there's the other part of this is what's called sensitivity. And this determines how sensitive the decoder is going to be. So these are going to be the 3 CBs that you're going to look at in the Athearn Tsunami 2s and the aftermarket Tsunami 2s. And what it's going to do is you're going to determine how sensitive the decoder is going to be to that change in load. And what you want is you want to kind of play with that a little bit. The good news is you can't break it by changing a CV value. So experiment. Set it. Typically on my diesels, I tend to use a fairly low value, somewhere around 20 to 25. And the reason for that is because when you run multiple diesels and you have couplers, you can have coupler bump or things like that that can change the load. And you don't want to have it super sensitive that one notches in and out of sync, because there's no way for the decoders to communicate back and forth with each other. And so it's an experiment. And so play with it a little bit, and you can always adjust it later, increase the sensitivity, decrease the sensitivity, whatever you need to do. And then once you've dialed it into your liking, then it stays. It stays that way, just like every CV. So anytime you run your locomotive, those settings are going to be in the decoder, just like your sound selections.
Yep.
So your horn selection, every time you put that locomotive on the track, your horn selection stays the same. So this calibration stays the same, so you don't need to change it. Now, as time progresses and say you run your model a lot, you may see some wear, and you may decide later on to recalibrate it. You can always recalibrate it again. You're not set in stone. And that's one thing that our decoders allow you to do, is to make changes even after you've set it. Nothing is permanent. You can make a change. Let's say you get in there and you've fat fingered something. I do this all the time. I actually found the other day I was programming something right before we went live. I have a model over here that I had a lighting effect wrong, and I couldn't remember how. And apparently I fat fingered the value. And so I fixed it while we were sitting here, getting ready to go live. And we'll show you that locomotive here in a little bit. But anyway, it allows you to really go in there and change it up. So you can dial in the locomotive specs. When we work with our friends here at Athearn and their design team, we work together to come up with what we feel is a good profile. But there's some settings in there that you may like. I know, for example, on my personal locomotives, we talked about this. I move mapping all over the place. I change buttons. On my locomotives, function 8 is my brake application. And traditionally it's mute. Now, that's just because that's what I like to do. But you have that full flexibility with the Tsunami 2.
Exactly.
So if you'd like, we can go ahead and try to do a calibration on this guy and let you see it.
So again, this is brand new Dash 9. We just took it right out of the box. And I'm going to go ahead and put it here on the track best I can. And let's see if we can get that with the other camera angle too.
So we've got that locomotive there. So first off, what I want to do is just kind of show you. So I'm going to do something here. I'm going to turn the master volume up a little bit, so that way it comes through the microphones a little better. Actually, what you can do is put a microphone up right next to it. So you won't get to hear Jim talk for a second, but I'll show what's going to happen. So what we're going to do first is I'm just going to move the locomotive forward to speed step 2. So you can kind of see, you heard the brake release. Now that our compressor's done, when I put the pressure on the locomotive here, you'll notice that I've got my finger here on the front of the locomotive holding it still, but you'll notice that the prime mover sounds exactly the same, whether I'm holding it back, which is causing friction on the wheels, or whether it's running at speed step 2. And, so it gives you, it's fun, it runs.
Yeah, it's running fine.
It's running fine, but let's see if we can dynamically change that experience.
Let's make that sound better.
All right, so first thing what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and program CVs. Now, we're going to do programming on the main. First thing I will tell you guys is don't be afraid. Programming on the main is no different than sending a function button. The command is prefaced with an address. So when you blow the horn, in this case, because this is out of the box, locomotive 3, the DCC system says loco 3, turn on F2, turn off F2. And so when I blow the horn, that's what you hear. Now, when I send a programming command, the DCC system says locomotive 3, change CDX to Y, or whatever the value comes up to be.
Right.
And so all we're doing, but to notice that address is there. So that way you don't have to worry too much about trying to remember the address, or you don't have to worry about changing other CVs on other locomotives. And just to show, we have a locomotive over here that's sitting on the table. And if you want to show,
sure.
Just to show it's sitting on the track, and we'll get to this one here in a minute, but this is sitting on the same track, and we're not going to be programming any of the CVs on it. So we're going to take our locomotive, and we're going to move him at speed step 1. Like I said, we're going to set that first plot point of minimum amount of power consumption. So on the main line, I'm going to program CV32 to a value of 2, and that's our 2-dot CVs. And then what we want to do is CV2.503, which is our baseline power consumption. We're going to set that to a value of 255. So I type in my command station, 503, enter a value of 255, and now the locomotive is calibrated its base point. Okay, so I bring it to a stop. Now this one's going to be a little tougher to show because I want to run it at a higher speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it back, and when you run it at the higher speed, you want it running on flat level track. But what this is going to do is I'm going to hold it back so I can get we only have a short section of track right here. So I'm going to get my CVs ready to go, and then I'm going to release the locomotive so that the motor gets running light on flat level track. And then I'm going to program my decoder. I'm going to grab the locomotive. I'm going to exit programming mode, and then I'm going to stop it. So we have no momentum into here. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to run at speed step 20. So we're going to go to speed step 20. And you kind of see it's trying to run next to my hand.
Oh, yeah.
So now I'm going to program on the main CV504. Now 32 is still 2. So you don't have to reprogram CV32 to a value of 2. Now I'm going to release, program a value 255, enter, exit, and now I grab my locomotive and bring it to a stop. Now I'm going to set my sensitivity, because right now we've calibrated, but we haven't enabled it because the sensitivity is still set to a value of 0. So we're going to take 512, and this is all covered in the user's guide. So if you guys buy an Athearn locomotive, you're not getting a partial, I'm sorry, let me say that again. First day with my new mouth. When you buy an Athearn locomotive, you're getting a partial explanation of some of the features, but you're not getting a full comprehensive manual. And so you want to go to the SoundTraxx website at SoundTraxx.com, and you want to download the manual for the diesel user's guide. The technical reference, leave that off to the side for now, but the user's guide will explain every feature in English terms. It explains what you're doing, what the feature is, and how you're making the adjustments. So right now I'm going to take CV512 to a value of, let's say, a value of 25. We'll go ahead and go on the high end of what I typically do. All right, now I'm going to exit out. So now we're going to take our same locomotive. We're going to go ahead and move it there. Now I'm going to move it again at speed step 2, so we'll push it a little further back. So speed step 2, and you're going to hear that diesel engine notch up.
Mm-hmm.
But now watch what happens when I put my finger on it. Listen, you hear that diesel engine notching up because it's working harder against my hand to keep the locomotive running. And so that's how it's using that dynamic digital exhaust calibration.
Sure.
So now when I release, you hear it get a little quieter, and you hear it drop back down.
No more resistance.
So there's no more resistance. So now we're running back again at our light on flat level track.
Nice.
So, but that's how dynamic digital exhaust works. And this comes, you go ahead and mute the locomotive. You can grab your mic back. But that's how the dynamic digital exhaust works. And this is a feature that you get in all of your Tsunami 2 equipped models, whether it's Athearn Genesis or the recent release of the SD40-2, I believe.
That's right, yeah. Even
the SD40-2s had the actual Tsunami in it, because this was, we were discussing this back when we were having some parts issues in the world.
Chip issues, yep.
And so we went ahead and put Tsunami 2 in that one because we had no ETA on Economy at the time.
Exactly.
So the good news is you guys just won the jackpot, because that Tsunami 2 equipped SD40-2 has that dynamic digital exhaust built into it, and the dual cube speakers, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
So that's a great model,
That'll
and that means that's even less I have to do to those models.
I know, right? I mean, and those are going to be available probably in the next week or so. I think they just
oh, I thought somebody told me they got them.
Might have just come in. Yeah,
because I've had a couple of customers calling me and asking me about.
Have they? Okay.
So
yeah, they are brand new. So check your dealer if you pre-ordered with those, or if you're just looking for those. Definitely check your dealer, because it sounds like they're coming into dealer stores. Yeah. So, one of the things that I hear the most of some of my friends, they buy one of these locomotives, and we do have an operating session, and I'll ask them, hey, 9131, what's the cab number? And I'm sitting there punching that in, and I look over to the corner of the room to the owner, and they're like, it's number 3. And I'm surprised how many people do that. Show us real quick how easy it is to put a cab number in the with the Tsunami 2.
Well, let's go ahead and use this other camera, and we'll show. Right now, today, we're using this NCE power cab. And this is, a simple system. It's quick, it's easy to travel. But you can do this with any DCC system. So I'm just going to show you today how to use it. Let's see if we get that glare. Here, let's do this. We'll turn it up a little bit. Does that help?
That helps.
There we go.
Yeah,
now you just got to hold it still. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and push the program button. And there we go. Here, let's go a little further this way. There we go. Wait. All right, folks, this is one of the benefits of live television.
It's live. We're doing it live.
So you'll see there that it says program on mainline, and that's what we're going to go ahead and do. So I'm going to press the enter key. See if maybe we pull back a little bit and go vertical.
Yeah, maybe, or if we just do this.
That might help.
Let's try that.
Nope.
All right, let's see if you can. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to.
Well, your camera's on this side, so I'm wondering if we just. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll figure it out. All right.
Again, it's live.
There we go. All right. So program on main. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to program on main. Now, the next entry there you see in the screen, it says program loco, and it shows loco 3.
Right.
Well, that's going to guarantee that I'm talking to address 3, which is the 91. This model that you just opened up happens to be 9131. The default address is 3. Mm-hmm. Now, on the main track over here, we have 788. This is my personal one, and it's already programmed as 788.
Right.
So when I send this programming command to address 3, 788 knows it's not for him, so he ignores the command. And that's how this works. So that's why this is important. Program loco. You want to make sure that you have the correct address here.
Right.
Or if you don't have the right address, then who knows what you're programming. But this way, and this is one of the caveats too. If you have all your locos programmed as address 3, you'll need to take all the address 3s off of your layout to do this on the main line. But you can do this on the programming track as well. So we're going to go ahead and program on main. Now you'll see over here it says 1 equals address, 2 for CV, and then 3 stands for CFG or configuration. Well, we're going to change the address. So we're going to push our 1 key. Now you'll notice here it says 1 equals long, 2 equals short. Now, when we talk about long and short addresses, a long address is a 4-digit address by some lingos. It's also known as the extended address, but it's typically the 4-digit, an address starts normally at 128 and works its way up to 9,999. A short address is stored in CV1, and it's usually called the 2-digit address or the primary address, and that's stored in CV1. And that's typically a number between 1 and 127. The default address 3 is a short address. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because when you're on the main line, I cannot make changes to the short address because that's the address that's active.
Gotcha.
Because it doesn't want you to accidentally lose control of the decoder. Let's say you were trying to program CV51, which is a lighting effect, but for some reason you missed the 5 and you hit the 1 and enter. Now you put your CV value in there. Guess what? You just changed the address, but in your mind, you were changing a lighting effect.
Yeah.
But that's why it does this. And so when we're on the main line, we can only change the address type that is inactive.
Gotcha.
So in this case, address 3 is a short. So we're going to program 1 for long. And now we want 9131 anyway. So that's a long address. So we're going to go ahead and push 1. So now on my screen, you can see it says long address. We're going to type in 9131. And now when I press enter, now it programs the CVs for you. Now you'll notice that I have control of loco 9131.
Mm-hmm.
So when I blow my horn,
whoop, got silent still.
Oh, I'm muted. That's right. So now when I blow my horn, I can blow my horn and I can run my locomotive. But now my locomotive that's over here hasn't run, because it's 788. So it ignored that command that was sent to address 3.
Yeah. Nice.
And that's how you can do mainline programming. And you can do anything you want mainline programming. And one of the advantages of doing mainline programming is you can instantly change the volume like I did earlier.
Right.
Because you can make it louder or quieter. So right now it's at a master volume of 200.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we want to turn it up. So again, hold on, I went fast. So we're going to push our program button. You see program on main, enter. Now you'll notice program loco 9131, because that's the loco I'm talking to. So I'm going to press enter. Now in this case, we're programming a CV, which is our master volume, which is CV number 128. So we're going to type in 2 for CV. Now it asks program CV number 128. And then I enter, and it says enter value. Now I'm going to set it to 255. And then when I hit the enter button now, you're going to notice that this locomotive volume will now increase by about a quarter. So let me press it. 3, 2. You kind of heard a subtle change because we were already at 200.
Sure.
So it wasn't very loud. We can go back and do the same thing if we want to quiet it up. So CV 128, enter. We're going to enter a value of 100, which is going to be significantly quieter. So now when I press that value,
oh wow,
you notice how much quieter it got.
Yep.
And that's where you can do programming on the main. And the advantage, again, is because you can instantly hear those changes.
Exactly.
When you're programming on the main, you instantly hear. So you can decide for yourself how loud or how quiet. You can decide for yourself different lighting effects. So you turn on the light and say you want to change the lighting effect. You just change it here with CVs.
Mm-hmm.
And with that light illuminated, it will change all the blink patterns or whatever to match the different lighting effects. So let's say you had one of the MKT GP38s with a strobe light.
Yes.
And you want to, I know this is something that's been up on some of the Katy forums. Sometimes people say they're strobes. Some people say they're rotary beacons. It gives you the ability to change it. So I don't remember what we programmed it by default as.
I remember now.
But you can go in and make that change so that your locomotive performs the way you want it to be. And then, so just for grins, we'll go ahead. Whoops, wrong button. CV 128, we're going to turn it back up to 255. And again, you can instantly hear that locomotive get louder.
Right.
And I can change individual volumes too. So in this case, we can hear the horn. Actually, let's use the bell.
Let's do the bell.
The bell, because the horn's kind of loud.
Yeah.
But we have our bell right there that's ringing. So I can go in here and change CV 130 to a value of 50. You hear it got a little quieter, but it was close to what it was. So let's take CV 130. Let's take it up to 200. Let's really annoy some people, right? That bell is that much louder.
Yep.
So now again, let's take it back down. So 130. I know on mine, I tend to like a value of about 35.
Okay. Wow.
And that's significantly
Very
quieter.
significant, yeah.
But one of the things I like to promote is what's called scale sound.
Yep.
And scale sound means if I see the locomotive, hold on, I'm not selling ice cream. Let's turn off the bell. A part of my operating crew, that's one of the fun things when the guys leave the bell on, they run around, who's selling ice cream? So that's our way of demeriting each other.
There you go.
But anyway, what this does is this allows you to adjust for what you're doing. And so when I talk about scale sound, we're looking at the locomotive. And when I'm this far away from the locomotive, if the real one looked that small to me, how much would I hear from this distance? Now, this is right here in front of me. So of course I'd probably hear most of the sounds because I'm only, we'll say maybe 100 feet, 100 yards away scale.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But now if I'm operating a massive layout, and let's say you're on one side of a 70-foot peninsula, and I'm on the other side of the peninsula, I shouldn't hear your locomotive like I'm sitting next to it.
Right.
And that's what scale sound is. And what it does is it also allows you, to optimize the different volumes of all the different sound effects, whether it be the horn or the bell. The horn, I might hear it 70 feet away,
Right.
but I shouldn't hear the bell. I should barely hear the prime mover, if at all. Certainly shouldn't hear fireman Ed using the doors or using the wrenches, things like that.
Now, here's a good question here, and I think we kind of covered it, but is, hey, George and Jim, this is from JGood30.
Mhm.
I've noticed my Dash 9s are much quieter out of the box compared to my Genesis EMDs. Is there anything specific I need to look for in the CVs?
It depends. There's various differences between the sound files, of course,
Right.
and those play a factor. GEs, I know they have a lot of low energy, and so with these cube speakers, it's able to reproduce it, but it's not very loud. So these speakers you're only talking are fairly small. So while they can reproduce it, kind of like your headphones, when you have your headphones on, you can hear that low frequency, but then when you pull the headphones away, all you hear is this,
Mhm.
you know, that real
Yeah,
high pitch.
Right.
And so the GEs have a lot of low energy. And so with two cube speakers, they're doing their best. So what I would recommend probably at this point is start with the equalizer. Just like every Tsunami 2, we have a 7-band equalizer, just like you have on your home stereo system.
Okay.
So when you look at the individual 7 bands, I would say go in and program the 7 bands to match your liking. Start with the first one, which is CB225, and that's the control register.
Okay.
And you want to set 225 to a value of 7, and that turns on the user adjustable. Then what you're going to do is CB226 through 232 represent each of the 7 bands. So it starts out at 62 hertz, 120 hertz, 250 hertz, 500 hertz, 1000 hertz, 2000 hertz, and 4000 hertz. And that's your 7 bands. And so the 62 hertz is below that 100 hertz frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll take that and cut it to 0.
Okay.
Then you're going to take that 120 hertz and you kind of boost that up. And the way the CV value works is the value of 128 is flat or no change. It's right in the middle.
Yeah.
So you can boost it by raising the CV value, and you can cut it by dropping the CV value.
Okay.
And so you can go in and play with this and just listen to the locomotive. Listen to the changes as you're making those. And what will happen is you'll get to a point where maybe you're boosting a little too much. And what happens is it causes the speaker to distort the sounds.
Yeah.
And that can happen. And that also happens if you run everything at high volumes, which is another reason why we promote scale sounds, because it gives your speaker the ability and range to produce those sound files that you're trying to ask it to. The other thing you can do is we have what's called a high pass filter, and that's built into the decoder, and it's a hard filter that takes anything below a specific frequency and cuts it out so that your speaker works more efficiently.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a couple of YouTube videos on how to do all of this stuff on our SoundTraxx YouTube page. Also, all of this is explained in the user's guide. We can do some demonstrations here, but I don't know how well the sound's coming through the live feed.
Right.
I know back when we were doing our webinars, which was before Zoom and StreamYard and those things were cool. But we were having to learn how to work with the audio because a lot of these engine sounds can come through as background noise.
Right.
And so it filters it out because it's trying to let our voice come through. So I don't know how well these sounds are coming through. And so that
let
may
us
be a
know in the
factor.
comments, guys, if you can hear the refinements that George is making, to the bell and to the prime mover. If not, we'll cover some other features because there's so many things we can fine tune with these. I know both of us with our layouts, my layout's tiny, real tiny. So when a factory equipped locomotive goes in there and it's in a box, a shadow box type, it's way loud.
Yes.
And for me and for you too, what we like to do is we like to go through and we start with the prime mover, then with the bell, then with the horn. And you can fine tune all that. You can fine tune the compressor sound.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's that easy.
There's multiple compressors that you can choose, and then you can choose the volume.
Right.
And here's a little fun fact for you guys that you may not realize. Our sounds are actually interactive based on how you use the locomotive.
Right.
And what I mean by that is when you use the F11 brakes, which by default turns on the F11. So when I start moving my locomotive and I hit F11, you'll get that brake squeal. Now, out of the package, it's just a sound effect. But where I'm going with this is our sounds are interactive. And so the more frequently you use your brakes, well, the engineer's depleting the air reservoir. So what happens? The governor kicks the compressor on. So our sounds are not just noises. They play back based on how you're using your locomotive. So again, it gives you that realistic experience of how you're using your locomotive. And a lot of these sounds, I saw a comment earlier that posted, it caught my eye. A lot of these sound effects and features are also available on the Steam Tsunami 2 decoders. We're just talking about diesels because I know most of what Athearn makes are diesels.
A lot of diesels,
I know they have some stuff in the works that I believe, but
we won't talk about this.
We're not talking about it. I just said we know we've got some steam coming.
We do. And you know, one of those things, you know, going back to the brakes. I mean, I'm using a proto throttle. I think, are you using a proto throttle yet?
I have a proto throttle.
You have a proto throttle.
I don't use it as much as I probably could, but
it's so fun. But this is where the Tsunami 2 really shines because you can map it. You can set up things personally on your proto throttle that work good for you, whether you have a layout that's a lot of mainline running or in my case a switching layout. And what he's talking about with the brakes, man, it's so cool to actually operate a locomotive like a locomotive instead of buttons.
Oh yeah.
And that brake feature is something cool.
Yeah.
I did see a question earlier here. I'm going to see if I can bring it up here. This is from Ronald. Wants to know,
see this other one up here too.
Yeah, let's go back up here to Ronald.
Because I'll show you that real quick.
Echo of horn, CV, and volume. Good question.
So this is another feature of the Tsunami 2 that you can add echo and reverb to the air horn. And the way it's designed is CV233 is what's called the control register. And again, similar to the way that our equalizer works, you can pick between some of the preset defaults or a value of 7 turns on to user adjustable. Now, personally, I like this in this case for the presets. So on this locomotive right now, I don't remember what the settings are actually out of the factory. But what I'm going to do is, first off, I want to play the air horn just so you can hear it. I'm going to do the short horn because that's where you can hear the difference more dramatically. And you can hear how quickly that air horn dissipates from when I turn it off. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and add a medium echo.
Okay.
So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my programming CVs. Now I'm going to take CV 230, whoops, wrong button, 233. And I'm going to set that to a value of 5, which is my medium echo. I think we actually called it a long echo and then an extra long echo. So we'll use the term medium echo.
All right.
We'll push a value of 5. Now, I've enabled the long echo, medium echo, whatever you want to call it, on our decoder now. Now, the other side of this is then there's CVs for every sound effect to determine what percentage of that echo is fed back into the different sounds. So air horn is CV161.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to take CV161 and let's do this kind of high. So I'm going to set this for a value of 200. So I've got a long echo, extra long, or extra percentage, kind of a high percentage.
Okay.
So now when I blow my short horn, take a listen. Now, on my personal ones, I don't typically go that high. What I want to do is I want to create a little bit of an ambiance to create that atmosphere. So typically when I do this, I'll go down to around 100 versus that high. So you can kind of hear a little bit, maybe even a little lower than that. Let's take 161 to a value of 50. So you can kind of hear a little of that atmosphere and it's not overpowering.
Right.
But again, this allows you to determine how much of that sound you want. And this is where programming on the main is really coming into play.
Sure. Because
I'm making all these changes live and my other locomotive over here on the track is ignoring all those commands because I'm talking to 9131.
Exactly. No, that's great.
So that's just one of the cool features for the horn and echo. So CV233 is going to be the control, and then CV161 is our air horn percentage. And again, it's up to you to determine how much or how little you want to put into it. You can even add reverb and echo to Fireman Ed's toilet flush if you want. Which is a sound effect.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Fireman Ed has several tasks that he does, including the air conditioning unit.
Right.
And all of these have probabilities. So if you're modeling Arizona, let's say you're modeling BNSF in southwestern United States,
sure,
they tend to be hot.
Oh, yeah.
So the AC is going to run more frequently. So you can set that percentage in there. If you're running an urban area, or let's say Alaska in the winter, probably not so much. You can turn those probabilities down. But yes, firemen Ed in our diesels have a lot of tasks to do, including turning wrenches, using the pneumatic lubricators, the air conditioning unit, and a few other tasks, including, and yes, not limited to, Fireman Ed's toilet flush.
Yeah.
And so if you want to add echo to that toilet flush, knock yourself out, you can do it.
And let's see, another comment I saw here.
I'm sorry? Doppler, no.
Bernard says, way I understand it, these tweaks are also cover the earlier diesels, Jeeps. Tsunami 2.
Yeah, anything with a Tsunami 2. The only difference is between the Tsunami 2 that you would get in this Dash 9 versus what you're seeing in the F7s or the early Jeeps is the sound file selection. When we work with your development team, this decoder is going in at GE, so we select it with relevant GE sounds,
right?
Multiple prime movers. So if you got a GP38, or let's even go back to that SD40, you're going to get multiple versions of a 645 turbo to choose from, because that decoder is being designed specifically to drop into that locomotive. So that way you have some variations if you so choose, but you don't necessarily need to if you don't want to with these tweaks that we've been talking about today. But otherwise, the features themselves are all built into the decoder. So you really kind of have your own settings that you can make it, and make it your own.
We were talking about this a while back. I picked up the GP15s from the previous run, and it's a leasing locomotive now, but its lineage was Conrail. And so I was able to go to YouTube and find a GP15 that was a Conrail.
Oh, right.
Had the same Leslie horn, I believe. And we had 3 different versions in the Tsunami 2 for that horn, and I could just sit there on the main program until it sounded like the one on the YouTube video, and boom, you're done.
Yeah, with 40,
easy.
With over 40 different air horns that are pre-programmed in these decoders that are just selectable by a CV, you can make them your own. If you want to make this, a Leslie RS3L or whatever you want to do, I have a locomotive at home. It's a GP38-2 that I have a picture where the RS3L was replaced with a single chime.
Really?
And so I, needless to say, had to order it or model it. So I've got the single chime, and then I didn't have to make any changes or go to the computer and spend an hour downloading stuff. I just went over there and made a CV adjustment, and now my decoder matches my model.
So here's a good question. We were talking about the proto throttle earlier. Isaac's got a good question.
Okay.
Concerning the proto throttle, is there a way to make a long horn act like a short horn so you don't need 2 buttons for proto throttle?
The short answer is the reason we have a long and a short horn is over the years we do a lot of presentations at various clubs, shows, layouts, things like that. There's been times we've been at railroad clubs where we'll push the horn button. Now we're doing this on a small little test layout, but when you get into these big, massive clubs, they have a lot of DCC traffic. And so what happens was we were over there and we pushed the horn button, and it took 3 seconds for that horn to blow.
Wow.
And then when we released, of course, it took 3 more seconds for that command to come out.
Sure.
Now, if you do the math, that's a lot of DCC traffic. And so it kind of cemented in our mind to leave the short horn, because the whole purpose of the short horn is for whistle signals. Everybody's heard this traditional long, long, short, long for grade crossing. But you have other sounds like, for example, and this goes back more to steam days. They don't use it quite as much in diesels, but flagmen protect the rear of the train is a long and 3 short blast of the whistle. Well, if we were relying on that DCC system to create that display or that whistle signal with that kind of a delay, is it really going to give you that experience?
Yeah, exactly.
And so the proto throttle is the only exception where that is. Now I will tell you, you can select different air horns, different whistle. Different horns have different attack and decay depending on the type of the whistle or the horn. So you can probably get it to be fairly reactive, but the long horn is designed to be pushed and held at least for a second or so to really kind of get that. The Christmas of the short horn, so we unmute this guy, and the Christmas of the short horn, I can play, and I'm just pushing the F3 in a pattern. I could never do that especially with those DCC systems with a lot of traffic. Now I won't name which layout it was, but that was kind of reason why we had continued that long and short horn.
Sure.
So I will say that with one of our other products called Blue Nami, opens the door for that going back to a single, because now we're having that Bluetooth and we're not relying on the DCC track.
Yeah. Definitely.
But that's, another product.
Yeah.
But this is all based off of the Tsunami 2 is based off of the DCC track. So you're kind of relegated to those type of things. And so I love my proto throttle. I think it's there, but I would love about 3 to 4 more buttons.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of it is because I know what all the decoder does.
Oh yeah.
And so, like, for example, function 17 off the top of my head, I think it's 17, is fueling. So if you have a diesel facility, instead of your hostler at your op session just grabbing a locomotive and putting it on the ready track, he can actually service the locomotive now. Yeah. Go on there and fuel the locomotive, and then press the sounds. You can go in and do general servicing where he's turning the wrenches and using the gun. And it's same on steam. You have all those different sounds like fueling, taking on coal, taking on water, and cleaning the fire. And so it gives more to do. And so that's why I say I'd like a couple of extra buttons on my proto throttle, but that doesn't keep me from using it.
No, most definitely. So there you got it for sounds. And take a look at what George was talking about. Look at the full manual of the Tsunami 2. What you get with the Genesis locomotive, it's going to be good to go, but you can get even deeper. And Robert's actually got a good question here. I'm going to put this up here. Can you program in a grade crossing sequence? That's a good question.
So the short answer is yes. By default, I know the Athearn CV default functions have function 3 as the short whistle,
right,
or the short horn. If you go in, and I forget, if you take CV 30, I'm doing this by memory, so don't quote me on the exact CV number, but I think it's 37 or 38, set it to a value of 0.
Yep.
Then function 3 becomes a grade crossing sequence.
Oh, very cool. So
it's hidden in there. Now the aftermarket Tsunami, it's defaulted to function 9.
Yeah.
But I think you guys use function 9 for something else, and off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank, but that doesn't mean much. I get hit in the head a lot. But what it does is function 9 by default is a grade crossing sequence. And again, you can move these things around. So if you want it on 3 on your aftermarket installs, you can do it. If you want it on function 9 on your Athearn factory install, you can do it. It's just movable.
Yeah.
And so, and then again, this is where the user's guide is going to come into play. But yes, we do have grade crossing, because that was something a lot of people asked.
Yep.
And then I do know also you can have lighting effects triggered by grade crossing. So on this Norfolk Southern here, if we turn on the ditch lights, when we blow the horn, the lights will start to alternate and flash. Yep. You can set the flash rate, and then you can also adjust how long they continue to flash after you release the horn. So when you do the grade crossing sequence, it's long, long, short, long, and there's my singing for the day.
Nice.
But the long, once that end of the long, then that timer starts. So if you have it set for 7 seconds, then 7 seconds, those lights will flash, and then at 7 seconds, they'll go back to solid.
Gotcha.
And this is all adjustable for you.
Yeah. And I mean, this shows just how adaptable the Tsunami 2 is. Now, we touched on lighting, and we've got the Dash 9 in front of us. One of the things we heard some guys say, the lighting is perfect from the factory. Love it. Other guys are saying, man, you know what? Those number boards are too dim.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't realize that we can change the intensity of the lighting on any of these functions. You want to do a quick rundown on maybe the number boards?
I can probably do it. I don't remember off the top of my head because I don't have my default cheat sheet on this one. But what we'll do is we'll experiment. So we're going to go ahead and move this locomotive over, and hopefully it comes through the screen very good. So 5 is traditionally the ditch lights, I believe. Correct? Yes, my ditch lights are on. So if you guys want to see the flashing ditch lights, we can blow our horn. And then when I release, you can see the lights go back. Now, real quick before we get to the number boards, I want to share a little story with you.
Go for it.
So when you blow the long horn, which is function 2, or the horn button on the NCE, you'll notice that the lights start to flash.
Right.
Now, we'll wait. Now, as they're solid, watch what happens when I press the 3 key. You notice that they don't flash.
Right.
This is done intentionally. Some people think it was overlooked because traditionally when you blow the horn, it triggers a relay, which is what triggers the flashing.
Sure.
Well, when we were designing the decoder, we actually had former railroad staff on site.
Okay.
And these gentlemen, that one of the most annoying things to them is the grade crossing for the bell, primarily. And so what they were trying to do is when you have the grade crossing bell enabled, which we obviously don't have it here, you can enable it. It's just a CV setting change to this bell selection.
Okay.
But if you had it enabled, what happens when they blow the horn, it triggers the bell to automatically ring. Well, when they're doing their whistle signals, 3 short for backing up, what happens is it triggers the bell, and then the cab crew have to listen to that bell ring every time. And so their biggest complaint is hearing the bell all the time because they're sitting in the cab. Now, those of us, when the train passes, we hear the bell ding, 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 ding. And that's the end of it. These guys are sitting in the cab. So what they try to do when they do their whistle signals is they try to hit the horn button, especially on these modern locomotives, enough to trigger a horn squeak or squawk or whatever you want to call it, blast. My words failed me at that moment. But you hit the horn button, but they were trying to do it quick enough to trigger the horn, but not enough to trigger the bell. So we said, all right, engineers, here's your bone. We'll throw you this little bone. And so we did that also on the lights as well. So it doesn't trigger the bell, it doesn't trigger the lights, but if you do the long, it will. So there's your little fun fact for the day. So now we're going to turn on our number board. So they're on now, and you can kind of see Jim's got his hand over there, so you can kind of see he's got a shade on there. Now I'm going to turn them off, and then I'm going to turn them back on. So you can see that they're coming on and off, but they are a little dim. Now, traditionally, the number boards are usually illuminated at night because in daytime they don't necessarily need to be illuminated. But we don't run at night. We're modelers. We like to be able to see what we're doing. So I'm going to guess the way this particular lighting effect is done is what's called on-off brilliance 1 or on-off brilliance 2. I don't remember which. We're about to figure it out. And what it does is it causes the light to be on but dim, and then you can adjust the brilliance using a CV. Prior to this, you had to change different resistor values to brighten it up, use a lower resistor value, or use a higher resistor value to dim it down. And so it became a crapshoot. And after about the third or fourth one, you're like, fine, I'll just live with it. I'm tired of doing this, because you have to keep going back and changing it. And so what this does is this allows you to change the brilliance with a CV. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead on the main line. And like I said, I don't remember whether this is brilliance 1 or brilliance 2. I'm going to take a guess that it's brilliance 2. So I'm going to take CV 62, which is my brilliance register, and I'm going to set it to 255, which is the max brilliance. And look at that, I guessed correctly. So now I have that number board at full brilliance. And and if you like that, great. You just set CV 62 to 255 on the Dash 9s. Now, if you decide you want to make it a little dimmer, we'll take CV 62 to a value of 175, and you can kind of see how they're a little brighter than they were before, but they're not as bright as they were just a minute ago with that full brilliance. So it's just a CV setting that you can go through and adjust and determine what you like for your locomotive. And again, this is where programming on the main is going to really come to shine. So anyway, but I did see a comment up there. Somebody was asking about braking.
I think Ronald.
Ronald?
Ronald, what about braking?
So braking, the way our decoders work is there's 2 buttons for brakes. Button 11 is what we call the brake application. And this is where we actually set the brakes to actually stop the locomotive. Function 12, by default, selects between the different braking systems. So with F12 off, your locomotive is running independent brakes. And independent brakes, as its name implies, are the brakes that are actually on the locomotive when it's running light, usually switching, hustling, doing spotting at industries, things like that, where the air hoses wouldn't be connected. And then when you turn on F12, the decoder will go into train brake mode, and you have different sounds. And the train brake, of course, is that now with the air hose connected between all the cars, uses the train for the braking rate. And so and they have different sounds in different settings. And so in the decoder, once you add some momentum so that the locomotive doesn't start and stop instantly, you'll want to be able to stop the locomotive a little bit faster. And so you can set a braking rate to stop the locomotive more quickly.
Okay.
So if you set the, and I'm going to bring this my other Dash 9, because I'm going to show you that on that one, because my Dash 9, I have a deceleration rate of 225.
Oh, this should be cool.
And people think I'm insane, but that's, I'm trying to simulate real world railroading.
And you've also got some other lighting elements that you added to it as well.
Yeah, but we were going to hold that as a little secret for just a second. But one of the things, but with the braking, when I cut the throttle, my dynamic digital exhaust that we talked about at the top of the hour,
right,
plus my momentum will have my prime mover drop to idle. And then I coast. So when I'm coasting up to a signal, I cut the throttle. And with that high momentum, my locomotive's still slowing down, but it takes a little bit to come to a stop. Now, when I start getting closer to the signal, that's when I'll set my air, trigger the brakes, and the brakes will actually now stop the locomotive more quickly. And I can feather the brakes on and off, and stop. And with a little bit of practice, try some settings. I know I have a couple of YouTube videos on our SoundTraxx channel about braking with different values. And I give you some nominal values to try it out. And you may decide you don't like it. Some people really like the ability to use the throttle to stop it where they want. And that's fine. That's why this hobby is so great, because there's so many different ways to approach it. But if you want to add the braking into it, in my opinion, it makes it a little bit more involved, a little bit more realistic.
Exactly.
Because the real railroaders have to use the brakes as much as they use the throttle. And that's something we don't know, because we don't all run trains.
That's right.
And so, but with this, you can go through and, like I said, you can set a high momentum rate where it decelerates for quite some time, and then grab the air, which means you're triggering the F11 to set the brake. And then depending on the brake system you have active, you can have different braking rates. But the reason we did the F11 was because prior generation Tsunami, and we wanted to do this also partnered with Athearn, was F11 was the brake application. And so this way it would be compatible with even prior. So if you set the braking rate in the original Tsunami and both independent and automatic braking rate the same on the Tsunami 2, they'll run perfectly in concert.
Yes.
And so if you're sitting in an engine, you have your control stand. F11 moves my engineer's hand this way. So my hand's on the independent brake with F11 off. And when I hit F11, I set the brake. Now, when I turn on F12, my hand moves down to the automatic lever. And then when I hit F11, I set my brake. That's how it works. So to visualize it with that. So we're going to go ahead and bring this other locomotive over. We're going to take this guy off.
And let's get this camera angle set.
We're going to set this locomotive. Now, this is one out of my personal collection that I had to get. And I have to tell you this, one of the coolest features of the Athearn Genesis Dash 9s is the fact that you guys use real chain.
That's right. Yeah.
I love that. That just makes it look so much better.
So nice.
But anyway, so now I'm going to grab my locomotive. I'm going to select 788. Now, one of the things you may notice on the locomotive picture that you're seeing right there is that blue light that's in the cab. This was something I added in the decoder, or I added to the decoder. Because I found that, first of all, Santa Fe didn't have the alternating flashing ditch lights.
Right.
So I wired the two ditch lights together on one function output.
Okay.
And then there was another unused function output. So I added two different lighting effects. First one was this blue flag. And so what I did is I used the FRED, which is the flashing rear end device light effect, and I mapped it to function 15, which is the brake, the handbrake set. And so now I have a blue flag. And I noticed that watching the Belen rail cam, they'll see a lot of this where they'll put it on the dash right in front of the engineer.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and this is an Athearn factory install, by the way. I just want to make sure to clarify, you guys can do this too.
Okay.
And so, anyway, so with this locomotive here, I'm going to go ahead and my light should be on, and I believe the light is dimmed. So I'm going to turn off the handbrake. So my blue flag is cleared. Now I'm going to go ahead and start it up. And in this case, I'm using function 5 to start it up. Now, I've also played a little bit with the equalizer on this one as well, and the reverb and echo. So now I'm going to go ahead and blow my whistle signal to start to move forward. So apparently I forgot to set up my automatic bell. I thought I did. So now I'm just going to jump to speed step 10, and you're going to see how long it takes to accelerate. But it gives that diesel engine time to throttle up when I'm running. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab it, drag it back. Now I'm running at speed step 10. Now I'm going to use my brakes.
Okay.
So right now my F12 is off. So I'm going to use my independent brakes. So I'm going to cut the throttle, and you kind of see it's coasting. Now I grab the brakes, and now I can stop it a little bit more quickly.
Very nice.
But again, you'll notice my volumes are down because of what's called scale sound. That brake squealing, I shouldn't hear it 100 yards away.
No.
So now when I throttle up, I can go ahead and jump to speed step 10. Now you'll hear the diesel engine load up, and now I'm going to release the brakes. And that gives you that interactive, so that locomotive is running with that sound. Now I come back. We'll go ahead and bring it to a stop. Now I'm not going to change the throttle. I'll go ahead and set the brakes so you can see how much more quickly it's going to stop. Now I'm going to cut the throttle. Now when I turn on F12, let's say I just tied into my train. Now I'm going to turn on F12. What you're going to hear is you're going to hear the diesel engine notch up, and you hear the compressor trigger as it's working to charge the train line. That's also your audio cue to let you know that you're in train brake mode. So I turn on F12. So the compressor starts cycling, and you hear that diesel engine notch up, because what it's trying to do is turn that compressor faster to charge the train line. In real world, this takes anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the length of your train. In model train time, it takes 30 seconds.
Okay.
So this will run this way for 30 seconds. And so I'm going to go ahead and just run it so you can hear the difference. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my throttle to speed step 10 again. You can hear it throttling up. Now I'm going to release my brakes. So now you hear a different sound when I release my brakes. And now my locomotive starts accelerating, but you hear that dynamic exhaust as well as the loading up of the diesel engine. So now when I bring the locomotive back, now when I set my air, you can see I've got a different braking rate in it now.
Yeah.
Because now I'm using the train to help help share the braking effort.
Okay.
So the diesel engine now can, and you can adjust this for your personal taste.
Wow, yeah.
Now what I have is I also have this set to be a little faster than independent, because I also added consist momentum.
Oh, cool.
So in CV23 and 24, I can take a consist and make it accelerate longer and decelerate longer. So I have this quicker, but when I run this locomotive in a consist, typically I have about 5 locomotives that run together. Yeah. When I set my brakes, it actually takes longer than the independent, because there's a higher momentum rate in the consist than independently.
Nice.
But all of this is adjustable. Again, I can encourage you guys to experiment with it and find out what you like, because you can really dial this in and get you a really fine locomotive. And it always amazes me. We'll go ahead and shut these guys down here. We were going to talk about lighting. We'll talk about lighting with it here in just a second. Yeah. But you can really fine tune and dial this locomotive in to your own personal taste, so that it'll be just like a real locomotive. Because we spend a lot of time, we want to make sure every rivet and detail and grab iron and reel chain are on the right location on the locomotive. Right. We want to make sure that we have a nice, realistic scene to run the locomotive through. We pay a lot of attention to operating with paperwork and make sure that we fill out our forms and things like that. This is just another aspect of it, is running your locomotive. Because, if you don't run any momentum and you just take your locomotive out of the box and you start and stop instantly, you can do that. I mean, obviously it's great, more power to you. But if you want to simulate what you're doing with a locomotive, the Tsunami 2 really does give you all those features. And this is one of the biggest reasons why we partnered with you guys, is because you guys understand what you're getting. Exactly. Anybody can make a noisemaker. Well, right. You can get a greeting card with noisemaker. But all of these sounds, like we talked about, the brake sounds, the compressor sounds, all interactive with how you use the decoder, brings this locomotive to life and makes it more fun.
And it's so adaptable. So it doesn't matter if you've got a giant basement Empire or a small 6-foot switching layout. You can adjust it to your own personal preference, sound volumes, everything. I mean, that's what the beauty of Tsunami 2 is. And like you said, it's a great complement for the Genesis series locomotives.
Absolutely.
Genesis brings the detail, and SoundTraxx brings the really
The detailed sound.
Yeah, the detail sound and the capability too.
Mhm.
You know, with the braking and everything else. If you go to a rail yard and watch real-time switching, it's going to look exactly like what George has shown here with his own Dash 9.
Yeah.
Now you have some other things you're going to show us too, or you want to get into some more lighting?
So what I've got here in lighting is on this particular one. Again, this is the Athearn factory installed Dash 9. And so the decoder's already pre-regulated for LEDs. And so I mentioned that I moved the wires for the ditch lights together to free up a lighting effect. Now there's also one that was actually unused. And so that's where I added the step lights over here on the bottom. You can kind of see the step lights here and then back here on the back. And what I used was the Nick's Trains, the guy that makes the decoder buddy.
Oh, yeah.
He does these 3D printed lighting with the actual casting. So instead of just sticking an LED under there, there's actually a casting that's shaped like the light would be. And so I painted them silver and then glued them to the underside of the step.
Beautiful.
And then just wired them up. And because there's 4 of them around, I just wired them all together to one output.
Sure.
Because with 4 LEDs, that's under 100 milliamps.
Okay.
And so that was really fun. And then on this one, I painted the air conditioning unit because this one comes off. Oh, this is one of the cool things. This is removable.
Yeah, that's right.
You can remove it and paint it and then put it back. So if you need to do a patch job on it, and then I did some of the scorch marks here on the back.
Yeah, that came out really nice.
Just a nice weathering job. And I loved the model, and it was a great starting. I actually sold my other brand Dash 9s to get this one. I ended up somehow with 3 of these Athearn Dash 9s. And I've got 2 of them done to this level. I only brought 1 this weekend, though.
Oh, wow. And so, yeah, I mean, that is basically a factory locomotive that you purchased. You've added some details to it, but you've added those lighting effects. And, man, those lighting effects just look amazing.
Yeah, and you guys did a great job with the lighting that you've already put in the model. So it's just a great compliment. I just added a couple little things. This is probably one of the Genesis models I've had the least to do. And I can't wait till those Mopac GP15s come out.
I know.
Because I won't have to do anything except weather it.
That's right.
I know. Right. Yeah. I'm so excited.
Those are going to be so cool. With the new lighting features that they have, yeah. I can't wait. I've got some on pre-order myself. So
yeah, the 15s are my favorite locomotives. So when I saw they announced, and with the number boards and the class lights lit, I said, "Oh man, I almost want to buy like 4 of them and just renumber them.
Yeah,
4 or 5 of them and just renumber them." But I've only got a 20-foot long shelf switching layout right now, so I think I have already 5 or 6 GP15s from prior runs.
In our defense, though, the Mopac ordered quite a few of those.
They were the biggest owner of them.
Right.
They amassed 160 of the regular DCs and then 30 of the ACs for a total of 190 units.
Wow.
Conrail was a distant second with 100, and then everybody else was somewhere around 20 to 30 of them. Right. Including the CSX. I think they only had like 10 of the GP15Ts or something like that. It was really small. C&W had a bunch, but it wasn't nowhere near 100. I think they had like, I don't know, 50 or something like that, 50 something around there. So,
and what we're talking about too is those GP15s with those lighting features. What we've talked about today, when you get those, you're going to be able to do that as well. You're going to be able to fine tune all of that lighting, all that sound. I know I'm going to fine tune mine for my proto throttle, and you want to get that real world experience. So you've got the looks with the Tsunami 2. You've got the real world experience with the sound and how the locomotive actually operates.
Hey, Rick, I see you there. How you doing, my friend? I've known Rick for years.
Seen Rick, and I see Vic is out there.
Hey, Vic. There's Vic.
Nice to see Vic.
Yep.
And a couple other guys that we've seen off and on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there you have it. I mean, it's probably actually, one of the sub-hobbies I've started is since really diving into these Tsunami 2s is I can spend hours just playing in there.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? If you really go so far, there's still that saving grace. You can't screw anything up.
No, you can't.
You really can't.
So we talked about, 40 air horns.
Yeah.
What happens if you try to pick air horn number 60?
Right.
Let's say you just hit the typo wrong.
Right.
And what happens is the Tsunami 2 has an intelligent algorithm in there to make sure that you can't pick a wrong value.
Right.
So if the range is only 1 to 44, you can't pick air horn 60. It says, we know better. And so it defaults to air horn 0.
Exactly.
There's a software algorithm in there to make sure. Yep. I know there's other brands of decoders out there that have a specific title, "Do not change this CV,"
Yes.
because it bricks it. And you're like,
Well,
wait a minute, what?
You're done.
What?
And you know what? It's funny you say that because our guys in service will know this has happened before.
Mhm.
Somebody will have a Tsunami 2 equipped locomotive, and all of a sudden, maybe they've done something, maybe they haven't, who knows? But they send it to service, and you know what our service guys do?
Reset the decoder.
Yeah, and it's so easy. What is it? It's CV8, right?
CV8 to a value of 8.
Yep.
So the good news is you didn't break the decoder.
Exactly.
You might get some unexpected or unpredicted behavior that you didn't necessarily want, but you didn't break it. You can change the CV back, or you can just reset it and start over.
Yeah.
It's easy. But, I want to talk to your when you say you can spend hours, yeah, you can spend hours playing with it.
Yeah.
But the good news is once you find what you like when I have my momentum rates, I have them stored on my phone. I actually have a chart that says, okay, momentum acceleration is this, deceleration is this, braking rates are this. Yeah. And whenever I get a new locomotive, I just go in and just type the CVs because I've already done the hard work.
Sure.
And so it makes it easy. So when you're talking about like a fleet of locomotives, let's say you get a fleet of Dash 9s and Gevos and whatnot from Athearn with Tsunami 2. What you can do is you can then go in and have your default standard CVs that are applicable to every locomotive that you own.
Right.
And then you can fine tune certain aspects of that. Absolutely. So that way, like your volume levels. This is something I get asked every now and then is because what do you do your volume levels? Well, a lot of us have smartphones.
Yep.
And on a smartphone, you can go to this app store or what does Android call it? Their Play Store or whatever it is. Yeah. And you can download a my brain just went blank. It's a meter for reading. Your locomotive, and then you set decibel meter. That's the word I was looking for.
That's what you're looking for.
And so we've
been setting up the show all day. We're fried.
I've been up since 5 a.m. because I had to get to the airport too. But anyway, you set your decibel meter X number of feet or inches or however you want to do it away from the locomotive. And then you adjust all your volumes and you decide what your decibel parameter is. And this works well in clubs.
Yep.
You can decide that we want a minimum decibels or you can do a maximum decibels, depending on what you're trying to do. And you can use that as a guide to decide what you set your locomotives to. And it's up to you. But once you set your values and decide what you like, it doesn't take an hour for every locomotive. You just go in and fit. You could spend an hour or two fiddling with it and seeing what it can do. Right. And once you understand it, then you go in and set your CVs. I have a video that we posted on our SoundTraxx YouTube channel where it ended up being about an hour long, where I took a Gevo that I had put a 21-pin plug in, and I walk you through every step that I do for my locomotives, which would ultimately then include this one here that we've been showing off. Yeah. And it took an hour because I'm explaining every feature. But when I have those settings sitting in front of me, it takes 10 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes to type in a handful of CVs, sound selections, volume settings, and so forth, and then run your locomotive.
Now, if you're analog like me, you've got an Excel sheet. George has got it on his phone. Whatever it is, I implore you, when you get a new Genesis locomotive, spend some time with it. Figure out how you want it set up, and then document all that. And like you're saying, once you've got that first one done, it's simple after that. And then also too, if you dumb thumb it later, you've got stuff documented. You can go back, and it takes literally minutes.
Yeah.
To really put that all in there.
And the really good news is if you do happen to wander over and buy another brand of locomotives, you can plug a Tsunami 2 and it'll run great with your Athearn locomotives.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
On my consist, I have 3 or 4 different brands of locomotives on my train, and they all run together. I didn't do any speed matching. Nope. Everybody asked me, how'd you speed match them? Put them on the track and ran them.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, like I said, it just depends on how you do it. You can do all kinds of cool things. But one thing I do want to share is, guys, DCC isn't as complicated as it sounds. It can be intimidating, but don't be afraid to jump in there, play with CVs. Like you said, you can't break the decoder by changing CVs. You can get some different behavior, reset the decoder, and start over. Your manuals are there, the user's guide on the SoundTraxx website. I think you guys have the current Tsunami 2 user's guides on yours as well.
They're on our new website.
On the new website. And so download them, read them, start at chapter 1. Chapter 1 tells you what the sounds are. Exactly. If you hear this whirring sound and you don't realize that's the air conditioning unit, chapter 1 will tell you what those sounds are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you'll know what you're adjusting. So when you get all these lights and so forth, you know, it's up to you.
Yep.
But you have full flexibility with it. And that's one of the great reasons we partnered with Athearn, because you guys understand what you're getting. You know, you're getting this interactive sound system. You're getting a high quality audio. You're getting this customer support that you guys need, and you're getting that partnership. And that's why we're here today doing this thing, is because we want to show off the partnership. Exactly. We don't live close together, so we don't get to do live videos like this all the time. Yeah, I think we'd have too much fun modeling together.
We probably would. You and I like the same railroads and everything else.
Exactly.
So Jay Good says, hey, can you guys do this again with the P40, P42s come in? I'd like to see how, you know what?
I love that idea.
I love that idea. And
count it in.
Let us know in the comments if you like this kind of content, if you'd like to see more of George and I doing this basically like grassroots. You just got your locomotive. Let's set it up. Let us know in the comments, and we'll see if we can make that happen for you. We get some comments, too, about Blue Nami. That's something else we haven't even touched.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Blue Nami product, and it's a really, really cool thing.
So cool. So cool.
So I'm going to go ahead and let's see if I can get this Athearn P42 on the track.
And I'm going to charge up our secondary camera so we can see it here.
And I was going to say, I don't know how well we'd be able to see it. Let's see if we can move the locomotive or this back a little bit, and maybe it'll show up in the camera.
Yeah, we can always.
Because we can come back.
Too. There we go.
There we go.
That works.
But you can't see me.
Yeah, you're gone. That's why it's good to be short.
We're going to take our DCC system, and we're just going to put it down.
Yep.
Now we're going to use our Blue Nami. We'll go ahead and open up our Blue Nami app. So we dial it up, and you're going to see that it connected to the P42. And you'll know it's the P42 because we named it P42. Right there on. This is a Bluetooth connection, so this is talking directly to the decoder that's installed inside this locomotive. So go to standard over here, and I have my opening screen. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and connect to it and read all the CVs so that it has its settings. And there, so here's our throttle. So I can come over here, and I can move my locomotive. I can come over here, and I'm doing this with the screen, using it to guide my fingers. So I apologize if my fingers are not touching the right button, but we have our little horn, short horn. You can hear that I've got a little bit of echo in that as well. Nice. But you can operate everything from here. Now, this little menu right here pulls out a side menu where you can see all the functions that are right there. So I don't have to remember what F7 does.
Right.
It just tells me right there what it is through 14. And then over here, I can go to 15 to 28. And I believe right down here, you'll notice that the FX3, instead of saying FX3, it says ditch lights. Because I can change the name of what these are.
Right.
And so I can decide that I don't know what FX3 is. I can say it's a ditch lights. The other cool thing, and this is where Blue Nami really shines, is I can go in here and hit my settings. I can go in and make sounds changes. So I come over here to sound settings, and you have master volume. So we'll go ahead and click that, and you'll look, you have a slider. So I can take it and go all the way down, and you're hearing the changes being made. It's programming CVs on the fly. So we go ahead and crank it up. And we can go in and change the air horns. Whoops, hit that twice by accident. So just because I can do the Leslie S3L. So we click on it, and it sees it pulls down a menu of all the different air horns that are available in this decoder. And then when you get to the bottom here where the S3L is, where'd it go? There it is. You can see that it's highlighted, so you know what your change is, or what it's currently active. So let's change it to this RS5T. But was that right? Well, let's listen to it. There's a little icon right here. I can hear that instantly.
Right.
You see the reverb right there. That's determining that echo that we talked about, how much echo and reverb is put into it. If we want to adjust it down, Let's sample it. You'll notice there's not as much. We want to crank it all the way up. You can decide all of this on the fly right here, depending on what you like. And all of this, all your sound settings will go back. You have light settings. So if I want to change my lighting effects, speed settings, this is where I can adjust my speed tables, including a 28-point speed table. There it goes. So I can go in and adjust my percentages. And I don't have to use just the slider bar. I can go in here and click on it and type in a value. So if I know what the value needs to be, I can go in and type it in. We're going to go back. Consist functions. This is where Blue Nami really shines, is consisting multiple locomotives, because now instead of having to go through and calculate CV values, I can go in here and say my lead locomotive, I want my bell, my air horn, my short horn. But on my mid and rear locos, my bell, air horn, short horn, you'll notice they're not checked. So they're not active. So when I consist these locomotives, the air horn is going to blow out of the lead unit, and they're not going to run out of it. Wow. Now, what's really cool is then to add to a consist, it's a simple 2-click buttons. You click it to a consist. You tell it whether it's a lead unit is the first one.
Okay.
When you add the second locomotive, it says mid or trailing, and then forward or backward. And then you're consisted, and then these settings take place.
And then you're done.
And you're done.
Wow.
And then when we talked about dynamic digital exhaust early on, the app will auto-calibrate it for you. So I'm not going to let it run away, but I hit begin calibration, and you'll notice my locomotive will start moving on its own as it does the calibration. Now it's going to start running away, so this is where I'm not going to let it run because we only have a little bit of track. But it does the auto-calibration for me, and then it brings it to a stop. It's done the work for me. So all those CVs we talked about, you don't need anymore.
It's doing it automatically. Wow.
And you don't have to know CVs, but if you do want to know CVs, whoops, went one too far. There's CV settings right there. So if you do have your standard CV settings, it runs right there. Now, the cool thing about Blue Nami is you can install it in your locomotive. It's essentially a Tsunami 2 with that added Bluetooth chip. So you can consist it with your Tsunami 2s, run it on your DCC system just fine. Once you separate the locomotives and run them with the app, now they're Blue Nami and they're ignoring the DCC signals. Wow. And so therefore it becomes just track power.
Exactly.
What this does, this opens the door for not just easy access to DC units to be able to run if you have a DC layout and you're running Blue Nami, you can run it just like a DCC system through the app, but your DC track is on the power on there. So you don't need to go buy a DCC system.
That's huge.
The last thing, battery power, onboard battery power. So if you've got large scale or you have room inside a locomotive, you can put batteries on it and just connect the Blue Nami to the battery and run it.
So you literally can have dead rail.
Dead rail.
Oh, man.
It's within touch now.
That is so cool.
Now we just need to get the batteries a little smaller.
We do. And I think there's a company I know that does that. Horizon?
Yeah, I've heard about them.
I've heard those guys. I think they do RC products. So great. I mean, we got a few questions here we're going to take real quick. Let's see. We'll go up here. Looks like people want you to install some stuff. I don't think you're out for hire right now.
I would say contact your retailer. I know the folks here at Rocky Mountain Train Supply do decoder installations. They can do stuff online. And I want to thank them again for offering us this venue to do this presentation here for you guys. But contact them. They do sell our decoders here as well as Athearn products. And they do decoder installations. So call the store, contact them, and talk to them and find out what they can do for you. But otherwise, check with your local retailers or your local installers. And if you have problems, give us a call and we'll direct you somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guys here at Rocky Mountain Train Supply, I'm so used to call them N-Scale Supply.
Yeah. Well, they're N-Scale Supply too.
Yeah, they are. So they do it both HO, N-Scale. They do all scales. So give them a call. The real we got here is there an HO SD70 T4 Genesis release in the works? I don't know. I don't know what John's doing and Janik is doing.
I don't know.
They're not here. And but I'm sure they're working on something. Here's another question, though, more applicable. Can you make a change to a CV to make the cab chatter on a function? Now, I know currently on the Tsunami 2, F7 is to dim your headlights, and that normally brings on cab chatter.
Right. On the Athearn factory install, it does trigger cab chatter as well.
Right.
On the aftermarket cab chatter, on the aftermarket decoder that you would purchase and install, cab chatters on function 22.
Okay.
So it is there. And again, here's where it goes back to anybody can make a noisemaker.
Mm-hmm.
So we took that cab chatter sound an extra step further, and we have an intelligent algorithm to make sure he doesn't repeat himself over and over and over again. So there's, I'm trying to remember, I think there's 15 different phrases or something like
15
that.
sounds right.
In there that it chooses through, and there's an intelligent algorithm to make sure it doesn't repeat itself over and over again.
Yeah, definitely. Good question, though.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I saw a question earlier. Is Athearn going to have locomotives in the future with the Blue Nami on them? So it's kind of early to say. You actually, when did you release this?
This was just barely released last summer. Was the first time Blue Nami came to the world.
Right.
We've been working on it for a while, but
yeah, I think it's the Nationals, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So it's brand new technology, and there's going to be some things that we're going to look into. Now, right now, we don't have any set ETA on that. It's something that we're looking into. But for right now, we don't have anything set in stone that we're going to do that. But that's not a no. That just means that there's a lot of things we got to look into.
There's some more time, and cost is a factor because it is a little more expensive because you have that Bluetooth chip, hardware, and stuff like that on there. So,
and you do have to keep in mind that we're adding more to the decoder. So some of the decoders that we already have from you guys are specially made for the Genesis locomotives to fit in there.
Correct.
So we're probably going to have to do some work on the chassis and things of that nature. But I think in the future it's probably a pretty good bet that we might see something like that. Let's see what else we got here. If you guys have any questions about your Genesis locomotive and maybe fine-tuning some of the Tsunami 2 settings, here's your time to ask. And let's see.
And you can also contact us at support@SoundTraxx.com. We have a great partnership. You can contact the Horizon Help Desk, and they could, if they don't know the answer, they'll contact us and get you the answer. We have a great partnership, and I know I talk to those guys regularly for training, and they answer questions. If they have questions they don't know, I talk to them regularly. But we also have a full-time support staff at SoundTraxx. So if you need it right away and an email won't do, call us at SoundTraxx, and we can help you with the decoder side of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, our guys in the service center, they are trained by SoundTraxx. So they are being trained from the OG, SoundTraxx. This is the real deal. But if they can't answer the question, we've got a straight line to you guys.
Yes,
and
sir.
Same to you. You guys have that option as well. Let's see. I see a lot of requests for new locomotives, but we're going to talk about Tsunami 2 mainly. Here's a good question. Any way to add Blue Nami to existing Tsunami 2 installs?
Well, first off, I recognize that name. I watch his channel all the time. I love his. I've actually adopted some of his operating techniques by naming his figures. And so I have Carl and some of those guys on my layout as well. So that's a great thing because he's got a bunch of great ones on there. But anyway, so short answer to the question is technically no. Because the hardware on the Blue Nami is talking directly to the processor. So it's bypassing that DCC interface signal, which is what reads the signal and sends that info back to the processor. Whereas the Blue Nami chip, the Bluetooth receiver module, is connected directly to the processor. So you cannot piggyback it onto it. Unfortunately, it would be a decoder change.
Okay, good question.
Well, fortunately, unfortunately, whichever side you want to look at it.
But when you see the functionality, I can see a lot of people saying, hey, what?
Absolutely. And we are working on more board formats for Blue Nami to make it easier for installation. Right now for HO, we just have the universal hardwire. But more will be coming down the line. I just don't have the time frame. And Android is coming. I just don't have a time frame on that as well. Right now it is only iOS, but we're working on it as fast as we can. We're not ignoring you guys that are Android. It's coming. Like I said, just can't come fast enough.
And that's the beauty of Blue Nami is I think one of the limiting factors for a lot of guys with their DCC was they get scared with the CVs and all these ratings.
You look at this
is visual now.
And look at how many buttons. When you look at that, how do I turn on function 26? I don't know. It's a little bit harder, but here with the names,
it's all visual.
It's all visual right now, so I can just go right there and it tells me what it is. So function 26 is actually a lighting effect, and so you won't know it. You just say I turned on that lighting effect, and there it is. And that's what Blue Nami really does. And so it eliminates this intimidation factor, seeing all of this. But it does still work with DCC. We know a lot of
Absolutely.
people have DCC. It'll run on DCC. You'll never know the difference between that and a Tsunami 2 if you're running it on the DCC track. So if you buy an Athearn factory install and you install a Blue Nami in another locomotive, they'll consist together on the DCC layout as well. They just get the added benefit now of having the control through the app. And the last thing on Android I do want to clarify is you don't need a special Android version of the decoder. The decoder is going to have the capability to communicate with either, because it's how that Bluetooth communication is generated is what the difference between Android and Apple is. And so it's the software that works on the device, and it creates a signal, and the signal is going to be the same. So you don't have to wait for that Android to drop. You can buy it now, install it, and then run it on your DCC track until the app is released, hopefully again soon. Can't be fast enough. But once it's released, you're already set and ready to go, and you have a fleet of Blue Nami locomotives ready to go and consist with the app.
And the other beauty of the Blue Nami app is you're no longer limited to a third-party software.
Yeah.
There's some software out there that you can. It makes it a little bit easier than going through this. But we all know
it's put together by volunteers.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We're not throwing any shade at that. It's just one of the things that some things might not work as well as they look like they would from a drop-down menu.
You're reading their interpretation of our manual.
Exactly.
And so some things, you remember the game of telephone.
Yeah.
If I was to tell you, you tell them, they tell, and so forth. By the time, it's, monkey bubble something or another, and so there's a little bit of that at play too. So we get a lot of calls. Hey, I'm trying to set this feature, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm using this other software, this freeware version, and something isn't working right. It's like, okay, well, at that point, stop using it, use our manual, program the CVs directly. Once you get the decoder working the way you want it, then you can read it back into that program, see what changed, because it highlights the changes.
Right.
And then you can see, was your interpretation of their interpretation wrong, or did their interpretation of our manual wrong? And then which case, then you can contact their user group and say, hey, I found an error, and they can fix it. And they're usually pretty reactive.
They're really good about it.
They're really good about it, but just don't use it as the Bible. Read the manual again, starting at chapter 1, learn what the sounds are. And then once you know the sounds, then you can make the changes because you'll know what you're doing.
Right. Okay, I got another question here, and I think we know the answer to it, but we're going to put it up there anyways. And now I lost it. There it is. Sid. Chip shortage update for the Econami. That's pretty much passed.
It's pretty much passed. This was something that when we work with you guys, we're looking far in advance.
Right.
And so this was something that was, that SD40 we were talking about was something we were in discussions back in October, November of 21.
21, yeah, I remember that.
And that was where we, in October of 21, we were getting prognosis predicted shipments of 66 weeks. Yeah. Which, if you do the math, is more than a year. Yep. The good news is that, so in order to keep your production going and so forth, we removed and made Tsunami 2s. Yeah. But the good news was those chips started showing up in January, but there's no way to know the distant or the future if they're telling us 66 weeks. And so we had to make decisions. So since pretty much most of 22 and currently in 23, chip shortages, we fought through. We continue to place our POs, and so we've got plenty of parts on hand. So we shouldn't run into any more shortages other than just popularity and machine time. Yeah. Because we do manufacture all of our decoders in Durango, Colorado. Yep. And here's another little fun fact for you. Every single decoder that we build goes through the quality tests, whether there's a machine test that's done, and then our technicians downstairs will hand test every decoder, and that includes decoders for a run of the Dash 9s, or any of the Athearn products, our aftermarket decoders. Every single one is hand tested in our facility in Durango, because we want to make sure that decoder works when we ship it out. Absolutely. And that's where you're going to see that quality unmatched. And the reason I point that out is because it's an underrated benefit of using the product. And so, when you buy our decoders, when you buy the Athearn factory install, all those decoders have been tested. Right. And that way, you're getting a good quality. But my brain just went blank. The original comment that got me off on that tangent. Oh, okay. No, it wasn't. Oh, the chip shortages. And so what we're seeing right now is we're having a massive popularity. Our products are high in demand. We're building them as fast as we can, and we're just running in the limits on the machine time.
Sure.
And that was that's where I was going with building in Durango rather than building overseas in a foreign factory somewhere that we don't have any control over. So,
and another thing too that I want to point out while we're talking about it, not only are they designed here in the United States, made here in the United States, made for Athearn locomotives, but there's a misnomer out there that the sound is just sound a crew you send to actual projects.
Correct. We go out and we partner. A lot of times you guys have the contacts at different railroads. And so we actually go out and record the locomotive.
Right.
And to do this, it takes a lot more work than what you would think. I mean, we could easily just stand in a field and have a locomotive, but then I can't create a quality audio recording. And so what we have to do is we have to work with the railroad, whether it be Norfolk Southern or Amtrak, depending on the project that we've got going on. And we'll go out there and we'll actually mic the locomotive up, and then we'll work with them to make sure that there what we need to have a quality audio and the time frame, and they have the equipment. And sometimes a lot of these museums, we may have to pay the museum to rent the equipment, or donate money to the museum for use of the equipment. But we actually do record the actual locomotives, and then we come back to the sound lab, and this is where our engineers take those recordings and cut them into small portions. So when you're hearing a diesel locomotive idling, for example, this Dash 9 sitting here, you're hearing that audio clip, but our engineers have taken that audio and listened to it over and over and found a place where they can cut it over and over itself.
Yeah.
So it's playing a recording of our recording trip that we took to get that locomotive, and it plays it over and over again. And what's the great thing is our audio engineers are trained, and they are so talented that they're able to seamlessly transition from clip to audio clip without you hearing it. And so it appears that it's being generated by the decoder. But what's happening is, like, for example, an air horn or a whistle, you're actually hearing 3 audio clips spliced together, and you'll never know. Because the first is what's called the attack, and it's the sound of the whistle valve or the horn valve opening. Then you have what's called the sustain, and that's what plays over and over again, holding the button. And then you have the decay, which is the sound of the valve closing.
Okay.
And our engineers take those raw recordings, find where those transition points are in our recording trip, and seamlessly etch them together so that you and I don't hear the difference. And we don't hear the transition from sound clip to sound clip. And so it may appear that the locomotive is generating the sound.
Exactly. So, yeah, no, it's not just made with a synthesizer in a studio somewhere. I've seen the equipment that you guys use. It's full on production stuff. It's full on production quality.
It takes a whole suitcase to carry all that stuff down, and that's not counting the poles.
Yeah.
That's just the audio equipment, different microphones, recording trips, cables, ties, clamps, all kinds of stuff. I remember having to do, I did one recording trip for us, and I had one suitcase that was just recording devices, and I had another suitcase that was my clothes for the week. So
yeah, I mean,
it takes a lot of effort to get out there, and it's not cheap. That's the other thing, because we got to airfare, we got to carry all the stuff. Depending on what we're doing, we try to condense as many trips together as we can, but and then we try to also be respectful of the equipment.
Sure.
Because these railroads have to go maintain it backward, and I've seen some posts from other brands where they tie down the handbrakes and then they throttle up the locomotive and drag all the cars flat spot in the wheels. And it just gives the whole industry a bad name, because then now that company is now not going to be, or that museum may not be open to having anybody else come out, and then rumors go spinning around. So, we try to be as respectful, and we follow all the rules, follow safety. We wear our hard hats as instructed. We wear our safety devices, and we have railroad staff that's watching and helping us to make sure that we have it. And we're riding the locomotive, which is one of the really cool parts of doing these is we get to ride the locomotive.
That's always fun.
It was one, we did a recording of the Southern Pacific 18, also known as the Slim Princess. It was come to Durango a few years ago, and we did a recording trip. We had 6 of us in that cab. I don't know how we did it, but we had 6 of us in the cab. That was a fun trip.
Nice.
But yeah, that kind of stuff. So we actually do record the locomotives, and so I don't want anybody to think any of this is synthesized. If we don't have the sounds, we don't play it. That's why we don't have things like steam turbines or Whitcomb. Not a Whitcomb. What's the one I'm thinking of? The the predecessor, the Winton.
Oh, okay.
There's no Winton to record,
Right.
so
There-
we
yeah.
don't have a Winton recording in our library because
Well,
there's not one to record.
Likewise with the SD90 Max.
Mhm.
You know, we don't have that engine anymore. That prime mover failed. What was it? The 710? I don't remember, but
Yeah,
but we had to get the sound from the SD90 43s, which had the smaller GM locomotive engine or prime mover. There are some instances, but what's really cool is what was it, the DD40AXs? Okay, we had that one with the air raid siren.
Oh yeah,
That's a real.
that was a real air raid
I can
recording.
testify that is a real recording. That was not made up in a-
265H.
Yeah,
That was it.
That's what you're thinking of. Okay, good one, Sid. So I did see a question earlier too about N scale with the Blue Nami.
It's probably going to come at some point.
Okay.
The biggest challenge right now is if any of you guys take your pinky and you look at the pinky nail, that's about the size of the current Blue Nami receiver. And so trying to fit that onto a small N-scale decoder, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but we're probably going to hit the more common ones like the HO models where there's a lot more real estate on a circuit board than trying to focus on an N-scale drop-in right now.
Yeah.
So it's on our radar. We're certainly wanting to do it, but at this moment in time, it's probably going to come at a future date.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're running at about an hour and 30 minutes. Unless I see a question pop up, I'm going to let you guys get back to it. Now, don't forget, if you're in the Denver area this weekend, by all means, come on by the shop. This is an amazing store that they've got here. HO, N scale.
They even have large scale and O scale stuff over there. I saw.
Yeah, I saw some Z scale over here.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got new. They've even got some stuff that is formerly owned, I guess.
I saw some of that.
And there's some really cool stuff back there. So if you get a chance, stop by the shop here.
Rocky Mountain Train Supply.
Yeah, exactly.
Or N-scale supply,
Or
depending
N-scale.
on what your perspective is.
I know I'm taking some stuff home.
Yeah, we have to finish this up because we need to go shopping.
We need to go shopping after this.
They're going to kick us out of here, but they're not going to let us leave any
Here-
money.
The owner's coming at us right now with the pipe.
So anyway, I want to say thank you for this.
Yeah,
This was a
thank you,
great.
George. Yeah,
this was great. We had fun.
Good
We
times.
enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed this as well. It was informative. Bottom line, give us a call.
Yes.
You know, if you have questions about the decoders, contact SoundTraxx, and I know we have a great partnership. So if you have other questions, you can also contact Athearn support, and they'll be happy to help answer anything we can.
Yeah, and definitely. If you're here, we're also here for the Denver Rocky Mountain Train Show.
The Rocky Mountain Train Show. So
Yeah.
be sure to come by and
Stop
visit
on
us this
by.
weekend. It's not that far away. It's surprisingly fast how
20
quickly you
minutes?
can go. Well, from here, but I was going to say some of the surrounding cities.
Oh, that's true.
Like
yeah.
if you're down finding yourself in Pueblo or even Albuquerque, it's a 7-hour drive. You can get up
can
here
do
in
it.
time.
And it's worth it. It's a nice show.
It's
a
a
big show.
great show. There's pretty much all the major manufacturers are out here.
All the guys are
We
here.
certainly will be peddling our wares, and you guys will have some cool new stuff to talk about.
Yeah. So definitely. So if you get a chance, make it worth a trip. It's a great weekend trip. Come on up, come on down, come on over to Denver, Colorado.
Yep.
And it's actually going to be a great weekend. It's supposed to be warm this weekend.
Yeah,
I
it's
guess.
supposed to be beautiful. I can't wait.
Oh yeah.
All this wind is blowing all the cold away.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I did see one other thing I want to point out. Bernard C. there made a comment, and I'm just going to close with this one. There he is. Blue Nami does have the 7-band equalizer, just like in your Tsunami 2. So the Blue Nami is a full Tsunami 2, just with the added benefit of the app. So when we go to settings, I'll show this really quickly, and then we need to sign off. Sound settings, reverb and equalizer. There's our settings right there. And so you can adjust. You can kind of see I've already created a little bit of a bell curve right there to create the sounds. And you'll notice, just like I talked about earlier, the 62 hertz set to 0 because it can't reproduce it anyway. So there you go.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
So anyway, thanks again, guys. We appreciate you tuning in.
Yes.
Hopefully this was helpful. And let's go spend some money.
I think we're going to go spend some money. So until I see you all next time, be happy, be healthy, do some great modeling, and above all, high greens.
High greens. Have fun.
See ya.